Hi, it's Sandra from SandraD Imagery, and this session is about introducing you to Adobe Camera Raw, or ACR sometimes as it's known. And Camera Raw actually is in Photoshop. Now a lot of people say, but I can use these tools in Lightroom, and yes you can. But when you're working in Photoshop and you want to use some different techniques or tools, for example, to straighten the horizon, or to add some presets, or to open up the shadows, tone down the highlights. There's lots of things that you can do in Adobe Camera Raw. So for example, this is a basic composite that I've created, and I've just put the HUD in, and I've got the mountains in the background, but I just want to open up the shadows a little bit because it's a little bit too dark for me. Now, some people will use levels or curves, different ways, but what I do is I'll use Adobe Camera Raw. So I'm going to come up, click on Filter, and then go to Camera Raw Filter. And that opens up another dialog box, and you'll see that the sliders here are very similar to Lightroom, maybe positioned a little bit differently, but it has similar features. So for example, if I come into the light tab, I can adjust my exposure, I can lift that up. Now while I'm doing this, I'm not looking for a real image, I'm just going to play with the sliders and the tools. And if I double click on the triangle, it takes away that adjustment that I made. Do I want to add some contrast? I could slide up, or I could slide what I call down and change the contrast. Double click on the triangle, and that reverts back to the default. But this is where I've got highlights. I might want to lift the highlights a little bit, and I might want to open up my shadows a little bit. And now you can see there is a subtle difference there. Do I want to bring up my whites, or do I want to tone down my whites? Again, it depends on the image or the photo that you're working with, what your eye is attuned for colors, but it is a basic tool in here that you can use some of these techniques. Maybe I want to actually drop down the blacks, and I could lift the blacks if I wanted to. So there's the tab there with the light. I'm going to collapse that, and now let's have a look at color. I could change the temperature if I want. I can lift it up, give it a little bit more yellow, or I could take it down more into the blues if I wanted to. Double click and it gets me back to 0 default. Do I want to add tint? Now I don't tend to play with this much, and I didn't when I was doing landscapes, but if I go to the magenta, that gives a little bit more of a pink magenta undertone. If I want to add a little bit more green, it's the same. Double click to get back to that default. Vibrance, let's add a vibrance, and you can have a look at the histogram here. And that's what I like about the Camera Raw. You've got the histogram and you can see, what you're adjusting. To be honest, I never looked at the histogram much. For me, it was more about the eye. But again, we're all different. I'll double click and get that back. Now what I'm going to do is, do I want to increase the saturation or decrease the saturation? These are the sliders that you can play with. Let's collapse color, and let's go into curve. Let's have a look at a curve. Now they do have a curve. I don't tend to use this one in Adobe Camera Raw. I'm more about using a curves adjustment layer if I want, but it's there for you. If I get my midpoint and I just, drag it up, down, depending, do I want to do the lights, do I want to do the darks or the shadows, do I want to lift the shadows? You can play with that whatever way that you like. It just depends, again, on what you want to do with your image. I'll collapse the curve. Then if I come in and let's go to Color Mixer and have a look. So firstly, HSL, hue, saturation and luminance, and you can see there they are, hue, saturation and luminance. So let's say I want to increase my reds in the saturation. If I click to the slider and move it to the right, now you might find that in some images there's not a lot of red tones, so it's not doing anything. Let's have a look at the greens. If I change the greens and bump up that green a little bit, you can see the green starts to get what I call a bit of an artificial colouring. I'll bring that back to default. Now there's a lot of yellow and orange tone in this image. So again, I'll increase the saturation, and I can really bump that up if I want. I'll get that back to default. I can play with the blues, I can play with the magentas. You know, if you want to go into the hues, you can play. Luminance, again, about light. Let's go in and just see what it does with the yellows. See how I can make that yellow pop that's in that image in that foreground? So these are sliders that I just say play. What is it that you want to get out of your image, and what do you want to change in your colouring? Now the other one is colour grading, and this is where you can play a little bit. So for example, when I look at this image, I break it up into shadows, midtones and lights or highlights. But when we say shadow, most people think of the colour for shadows, black, grey, dark. But what we don't see is how the light impacts the actual colours of the shadows. So for example, if I come down here into shadows, I might want to get it more into that purpley blue. Have a look at the image. If I go into the orange, I get a little bit more orangey colour in the shadows, but I'm going to come down to the blues there, and I'll just get that where I want. My highlights, what do I want my highlights? What colour do I want? Let's go into a light blue and have a look at the sky. Because it's picked up the sky is a highlight, and so I'll move it up to a green. Whoa, that's certainly different. But let's come back into those very light blues. And the slider here, I can just adjust it down a little bit. Again, play with the sliders to get the different effect, because each photo, each creative composite that you create, we all look at it differently. So I might look at this and go, oh, I like that in the sky, and other people might go, oh, that doesn't look right. So it's just about playing and adjusting. Let's come up to midtones. Let's see what it does when I get into the orange. Now that really puts a colour cast over it. And so I'll bring it back into the neutral spot, and I might come down into the blues. But I'm going to bring it back to that neutral spot. And this is where you can play with your balance and your blending, all about colour grading. And quite often I will say lots of layers of colour grading are in my creative images, and I might use a combination of different techniques. I'll collapse that panel, and let's come down and have a look at detail, and let's see. I can do a little bit of sharpening here, noise reduction, colour noise. Now, you can do that here. My preference is I would do that more as a Photoshop layer, but again, it has these functions here for you. Let's collapse that panel, and I'm going to go into optics. I can apply a vignette if I want. I'll just bring that in. Again, I don't use these ones very much. I tend to use other techniques for that. So this is the panel that you've got. Now what I'm going to do is, let's say that, oh, the horizon's crooked. I'm going to come up and click on my crop tool. And when I click on that crop tool, you'll see different perspectives. Auto balance, straight. You've got your verticals, which is great for architecture, buildings, all of those. You've got quite a few tools there. So I'm going to click on to do the level correction on there, and it's pretty much straight actually, so I don't have to adjust that horizon. But again, Let's click on OK, and this is why I'm just coming out of Camera Raw. So there's my layer that I've made adjustments with Camera Raw. I'll turn that layer off and on and have a look at those subtle adjustments that we did in Camera Raw. Now I've come out of Camera Raw, I've made my adjustments, and then I'll go, oh, that horizon's crooked. What should I do? That's where you use Adobe Camera Raw. I come back up, I'll go to Filter, I'll go to Camera Raw, and I'll come back into the Camera Raw panel. And that's when you can go back up to your crop and you can adjust the horizons and the different perspectives. Now it does have other tools here. It has a healing, tool. It also has some other tools, masking. I probably will use those more in Photoshop, but again, this is what I would call a one-stop shop if you want to do some tweaking. Again, depending whether you're doing landscapes, portraits, creative images. And you've got a number of techniques in here. But what I also like is where I can do a little bit more color grading. So up here is a profile, and over here is like what I call the 4 squares. I'll click on that, and this gives me another panel, and they're called profiles, but I call them presets. So I can choose an artistic if I want to go that. It's a form of color grading. If I come in here and I go, oh, that's certainly given a little bit of a lift there. If I come down here, that gets a little bit more magenta feel into it. That's got more of a greyish feel for my eye, so it's a bit flat for me. But let's say I like that. I'm going to click on Artistic 4. But before I click on OK, let's collapse Artistic. I can choose black and white profiles. I can choose a modern style. I can go into vintage, and I can actually choose some different color grading. But I'm going to go back to Artistic and choose 4, and I'm going to click on OK. So the changes now have gone onto that layer. Let's turn that layer off and on. But now I find it's a little bit too strong for my eye. That's fine. What I can do is come in to my opacity, and I'll just dial down that profile a little bit. And then I can continue on my processing. And this is where I might come in and out of Camera Raw just for some little tweaks like I did before, adjust the shadows or the highlights, or make my midtones highlights a different color. That's a basic image using Adobe Camera Raw. The next one is where I'm really going to start playing with some profiles or presets for color grading. So let's take a break, and I'm going to dive into the next image. This image photographed at Tuscany straight out of camera. It's had no adjustments, and I've opened it up in Photoshop. Now I look at the image and I think, what do I need to do with this? What can I do with this? So firstly, I look at it, it's a bit dark in the shadows, so I need to lift them up. Now again, there's many ways that you can do it in Photoshop, but one of the easiest ways that I find for me is to use Adobe Camera Raw. And so I'm going to come up here, click on Filter, and I'll go Camera Raw, and then I'm going to go to Light, and I'm just going to open up the shadows a little bit there. Now I'm going to double click and take that back to 0, but have a look up here, there's Auto. And I always say don't be afraid to use Auto, because sometimes it can really nail some of the adjustments. So I'm going to click on Auto, and look what it's done. Let's have a look at the settings. It's adjusted the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, and the blacks. Let's double click, get it all back to 0, and do that again. And so by doing auto, you're actually getting what I call the bones ready to then add a little bit more finessing. I'll click on auto and let's have a look. It's really made the green pop. It's opened up the shadows. I can actually see a bit of detail here in these trees in the back. But I might say I don't want it contrasty. I could drop the contrast down, or I can do it exactly how I want it to be. I can adjust the exposure. I can lift it a little bit more, make it a little bit more lighter. I could come in here now and play with a little bit of color grading, and I might make the shadows a bit more in the blue. And this is where we play a little bit and just see. And I'll do a little bit of blending and balance, and it's just, again, I encourage you to play with the sliders, because that's how you learn. And what you're doing is developing your color eye. And, you know, for me, I look at this green, I think it's a bit bright, but someone may look at that and go, oh, I like that. Now, one of the things with the grass and the green, it's generally a combination of yellow in there as well. So I might come back, I'll close this panel, and then I might go into the color mixer. And I'm going to click on saturation, and I'm just going to take down the yellow a little bit in the grass. Now all I'm doing is concentrating on this area in the foreground, not worried about what's happening here or in the sky, because once you start trying to change colors, you're never going to nail it all through the image. So you tend to look at it and go, I just want to fix the green. This is just what I want to do. You know, you can look at it and go, well, the blues, you know, is it blue or is it aqua? So let's bump up the aqua a little bit and see what happens. Not too much, so I'll get it back and let's play with the blues. And there's not too much there. But I'm going to get these back to the default. Going to come back up to the light, and I might just open up the shadows a little bit, drop the exposure. I don't want it too light or dark. And then I think, oh, I've lost the plot. I don't know what I'm doing. This is where you can try another technique. Bring all these back to default by double clicking, getting it back. And now I go, okay, I'm definitely going to open up the shadows, really open them up. Do I want to open up the blacks a little bit? Yes. Do I want to open up the whites a little bit? Yes. So I quite like this in the foreground, but I'm going to go, let's go left field and play with some presets or profiles. Now, I can come up here and choose a profile, but you have another feature, which is the presets. Now, these presets sit within Lightroom as well, and I can access them from Adobe Camera Raw. One click. Now, mine will be a little bit different because I have a number of presets that I do like, and these are the ones that I've got up in this panel here. But what you have is all of these presets, predetermined colors. So if I scroll down and I look at landscape, I can choose a different color preset. Oh, that's quite different. Oh, I like that. That's got a little bit of that yellow green in that foreground. And that's what I remember when I was photographing at this location. Let's go here. Not too bad. All right, let's go a little left field and let's see what can I do with cinematic. Now have a look. These are all predetermined presets and they can give a color grading. Now some people might go, oh, they're dreadful. But some people might go, oh, this is quite interesting. Let's go up to spring and let's see what I can capture. Now, if I choose that, Then I go, I like the foreground, but I need to lift the shadows. It could work. Let's come in here, go down to these different ones. Let's come back and have a look at what else we've got. I tend to use vintage a little bit on some of my images, and you can see it puts a bit of grain in there. I can also take the grain out. Let's go up and choose another one. Let's go Cinematic 2 and let's see. Oh, now I look at it and I think, oh, okay, I'm going to choose that one and I'll click on that. Now I want to go back and lift my shadows up. So what I need to do is get back to that original panel and go, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to change those. And so I might just come out and have a look at it, because I find that sometimes I'll click on OK, and this is where you get a true sense of what you've done. Now you're seeing your image in full size. Now I look at it and I go, okay, colours there, I can work with that. I'm going to do a levels, and I'm just going to open up that just a little bit, make it a little bit lighter. And then suddenly I might realise, oh, hold on a minute, I think the horizon's crooked. So what I need to do is, when I click on that layer, because I've done an adjustment layer, I need to do what we call a merged layer. Stamp visible is another name for it, and it's Control-Alt-Shift-E for Windows, and it will be Command Option Shift-E, I think it is for Mac. Sorry if that's wrong. But what I'm going to do is do a merged layer. So that gives me a pixelated layer. Now what I can do, because I have that pixelated layer, I can come back up to Camera Raw, and then I'll come in, and then I can just adjust my shadows, open them up a little bit, and click OK. Now I'm not looking for a well-beating image. It's basically, all I'm doing is just making some adjustments and showing how you can go back and forth with Camera Raw. Now if I wanted to, oh, hold on a minute, I need to actually fix the horizon. I forgot to do that, so let's go back, Filter, Camera Raw. Then what I'll do is come up to the Crop tool, I'll click on the Apply Level Correction, and then you go, oh no, that didn't work. Let's go back and see if I can undo it. And so it really didn't need much adjustment for the horizon. But again, I'm showing you how you can go back and forth with Camera Raw to do different adjustments that you can do in Lightroom, but once you're working in Photoshop, you'd have to close down Photoshop, go back to Lightroom, open it up in Lightroom, then come back to Photoshop if you wanted to do a few more things. It's the back and forth between two programs that I think you don't need to do. And that's why I use Adobe Camera Raw. Now if I want to finish this off, I could add some more adjustments. I could replace the sky if I wanted to. I could add some more, let's say, hue and saturation, or a bit more contrast, whatever. And that's another way that you can actually use Camera Raw to do that little tweaking of your shadows, highlights, color grading. And to me, it just makes sense to go back into that Camera Raw. The next image I'm going to show you is one of my creative images, and I still use Camera Raw for my creative images. This is one of my latest images that I've created. The background was created using AI to get the trees and the forest and look that I was after. The birds that I added were from my stash, and Red Riding Hood was created with an AI program as well. I've added a levels just to balance up the midtones and the shadows, etc. But now I want to go, I just need to do a little bit more color grading. like anything in Photoshop, there's many ways that you can do things, but I'm going to make it simple for myself. I'm going to click on layer 3, which is my top layer, and then I'm going to open up the shadows, play with the highlights a little bit, and maybe add a preset or a profile just to give some different color grading. So I'll come up to filter, then I'll go to Camera Raw, and the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to click on auto and let's see what happens. Now that's really lifted it, but I'm not happy because in my mind I wanted to make it a little bit more dark and moody. So I'm going to drop down the exposure. I'm going to drop down the highlights. I don't want too much, and I'm definitely going to do I want to get those whites down a bit. I might even drop the blacks down a little bit. And you can see now that it's actually changed. I've just clicked on auto again, but I'm going to go back to default because I wasn't happy with auto. Now I'm going to selectively open up the shadows just a little bit. Do I want to open up the highlights a bit? I play, but it's just opening up the middle section, which I'm not too fussed about. Do I want to make the blacks a bit deeper? I might just do the blacks into the minus, and we'll collapse that. Now, I could go into color grading. I could go into, dropping the color noise. Don't need to do that. Let's go into optics. Do I want to play with a vignette? No. I'm happy where it is, but I'd like to think I could get a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is either use a profile or a preset, and this is where it just gives me that difference within Camera Raw. I'll go to profile first, and I'm going to choose vintage, and I'm going to click on one preset or profile and see now if I go back, vintage 2, vintage 4, 5. Now I look at that and I think, oh, that's quite moody, quite like that. And 6, and that gives me a little bit too drama for me. Not that I don't want those tones, but let's go down to vintage 7. Now have a look. That's got a lot more greeny tone coming through. I don't find one I like, so I'm going to come back up here to the presets, click on that, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to play with cinematic. Now that's giving me a story in colour. That's how I describe it. Moody, but it's got the pop of colour. It's got some mystery. Let's go to 12. Oh, I quite like that. 13, 12. Choice is yours. I'm going to go with 12, and I'm going to click on OK. And let's have a look. Turn that layer off and on, and look at the difference by adding a preset through Adobe Camera Raw. And you can play here with the color tools for all you like, and sometimes you just can't nail that coloring. But I might want to drop the opacity a little bit on this layer, and I can do that. I'll drop it down to 63 if I go right down to 42, but let's go into the 60s. Can I get something different if I try a blend mode? What if I go darken, multiply, color burn? No, linear burn, definitely not. Do I want overlay, soft light? I'm going to go back to normal, and I'll take my opacity up. Now, do I think it's a bit crooked on the trees? Not too sure. Again, go up to filter, Camera Raw, and I'm going to get the crop tool, and I'll add the apply balance, let's have a little look. Oh, definitely not, that throws that out. So we'll get it back to normal. So sometimes when you've got verticals in there, it's an illusion and it may look like it's a bit off center. So I come in quickly to Camera Raw and just see, you know, I could do it another way to fix it, but this is the quick way. I'll click on OK. And there's my image. Now I'm going to turn that layer off. That's how it was originally. And that's how it is now using Adobe Camera Raw with a preset. Now, as I've been explaining, this is what we think as we're processing. Oh, that looks crooked. Oh, I don't like the colouring. Oh, hold on a minute. Do I need a little bit more light in? And this is what you're internally thinking as you're processing. And having the different tools can help you get your vision, you know, tweak your image or your photo, whatever you want to create. But when you're using Adobe Camera Raw, it's a tool within Photoshop. I don't have to flick between Lightroom and Photoshop. And you can't say at this point, oh, can you put that over to Lightroom and I'll work on the sliders and then I'll come back. Photoshop and Lightroom work together, but they are two different programs. Lightroom is not a layer-based program. So when you're making all your edits on that one layer, they're there. Whereas Photoshop is a layer-based program. Now let's say I've looked at this and I went, I don't like that. Because I've now put the Camera Raw or ACR changes on this layer, I can actually delete that layer. And I'm back to how my original image was. And that's what I like about the Camera Raw as well. I might make all these changes on that one layer, but I don't like it. I can easily delete it and then I could start again. So I'll do a stamp visible or a merge layer. There's my pixelated layer. Then I might come back up to filter and go to Camera Raw and adjust my shadows, play with the color. You know, I can add a little bit more vibrance. I can desaturate that right down. Have a look. As I start to desaturate, that gets some really vintagey tones. But now I might want to go in and actually just bump up the red. Now, the dominant red is the coat, but what you don't know is where are the reds in the leaves. So as I saturate this up, have a look what's happening. So it's more the red coat. But if I come into the oranges, look what's playing now. I can really bump up those orange and yellows in that leaf. Now I could also, because there's a little bit of blue toning in the background, I can play with that as well. I'll click on cancel because I don't want to make those changes. This is all about showing you what you can do with Adobe Camera Raw while you're working in Photoshop. Very similar tools to Lightroom, but you can do it all in the one place. Have fun with Adobe Camera Raw. Play with the sliders, see what you can create or mix around. But the more that you play with it, the more you're reinforcing the learning. And then when you get to an image and you think, oh, hold on a minute, I need to lift the shadows. Where can I do that? Oh, do I want to do it through levels, curves? You said, no, I can do it through Adobe Camera Raw. Thanks for watching. Have fun being creative.